Book 2, Part 5 of the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee, The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia by Philip Sidney. Book 2, Part 5. I must make you to know what kind of woman she was, who greatly affected us both, and who many times tore the veil of her modesty, having the scutcheon of her desires supported by certain badly diligent ministers, who often cloyed our ears with her praises, and would needs teach us a way of felicity by seeking her favour. Nay, when we were deaf, she would no longer stay in the suburbs of her desires, but directly entered upon them, making herself an impudent suitor, confessing the contention in her mind between the lovely brownness of Musidorus his face and this colour of mine. She would begin half a sentence with Musidorus, and end the other half to Pyrocles. I do more largely set this proceeding of hers before you, most dear lady, because by the foil thereof you may see the nobleness of my desire to you, and the warrantableness of your favour to me. At that Philoclea smiled a little. But, said Pyrocles, when this lady prevailed not with us, she made herself so absolute a master of her husband's mind that she could obtain the direction of everything, and so she servilely entreated us, and love, that would have poisoned me with roses, healed me with wormwood, for she sauced her desires with threatenings, deprived us of our arms, and threw us into prison. This king by his queen had a son of tender age, but of great expectation, brought up in the hope of themselves, and already acceptation of the inconstant people, as successor of his father's crown, whereof he was as worthy, considering his parts, as unworthy in respect of the wrong which was thereby done against the most noble Plangus, whose great deserts now either forgotten or ungratefully remembered, all men set their sails with the favourable wind, which blew on the fortune of this young prince, perchance not in their hearts, but surely in their mouths, now giving Plangus, who some years before was their only champion, the poor comfort of calamity, pity. This youth, therefore, accounted prince of that region, by name Palladius, did with vehement affection love a young lady, brought up in his father's court, called Zelmane, daughter to that mischievously unhappy Prince Plexirtus, of whom already I have, and sometimes must make, but never honourable mention, left there by her father, because of the intricate changeableness of his estate, he by the mother's side being half-brother to this Queen Andromana, and therefore the willinger committing her to her care. But as love, alas, doth not always reflect itself, so fell it out that this Zelmane, though truly reason there was enough to love Palladius, yet could not ever persuade her heart to yield thereunto, with that pain to Palladius as they feel that feel an unloved love. Yet loving indeed, and therefore constant, he used still the intercession of diligence and faith, ever hoping, because he would not put himself into that hell to be hopeless, until the time of our being come and captive there brought forth this end, which truly deserves of me a further degree of sorrow than tears. Such was therein my ill destiny, that this young lady, Zelmane, like some unwisely liberal, that more delight to give presents than pay debts, she chose, alas for the pity, rather to bestow her love, so much undeserved as not desired, upon me, than to recompense him whose love, besides many other things, might seem, even in the court of honour, justly to claim it of her. But so it was, alas that so it was, whereby it came to pass that, as nothing doth more naturally follow its cause than care to preserve and benefit, doth follow unfeigned affection, she felt with me what I felt of my captivity, and straight laboured to redress my pain, which was her pain, which she could do by no better means than by using the help therein of Palladius, who, true lover, considering what and not why in all her commandments, and indeed she concealing from him her affection, which she entitled compassion, immediately obeyed to employ his uttermost credit to relieve us, which though as great as a beloved son with a mother, faulty otherwise, but not hard-hearted toward him, yet it could not prevail to procure us liberty, wherefore he sought to have that by practice, which he could not by prayer. And so, being allowed often to visit us, for indeed our restraints were more or less, according as the ague of her passion was either in the fit or intermission, he used the opportunity of a time thus to deliver us. The time of the marrying of that queen was every year, by the extreme love of her husband, and the serviceable love of the courtiers, made notable by some public honours, which did, as it were, proclaim to the world how dear she was to that people. Among other, none was either more grateful to the beholders, or more noble in itself, than jousts, both with sword and lance, maintained for a 7 night together, wherein that nation doth so excel, both for comeliness and ableness, that from neighbour countries they ordinarily come, some to strive, some to learn, some to behold. This day it happened that divers famous knights came thither from the court of Helen, queen of Corinth, a lady whom fame at that time was so desirous to honour, that she borrowed all men's mouths to join with the sound of her trumpet. For, as her beauty hath won the prize from all women that stand in degree of comparison, for, as for the two sisters of Arcadia, they are far beyond all conceit of comparison, so hath her government been such as hath been no less beautiful to men's judgments than her beauty to the eyesight. For being brought by right of birth a woman, a young woman, a fair woman, to govern a people in nature mutinously proud, and always before so used to hard governors as they knew not how to obey without the sword were drawn, Yet could she for some years so carry herself among them that they found cause, in the delicacy of her sex, of admiration, not of contempt, and which was notable, even in the time that many countries about her were full of wars, which for old grudges to Corinth were thought still would conclude there, yet so handled she the matter, that the threatened ever smarted in the threateners, she using so strange and yet so well succeeding a temper, that she made her people by peace warlike, her courtiers by sports learned, her ladies by love chaste. For by continual martial exercises without blood, she made them perfect in that bloody art. Her sports were such as carried riches of knowledge upon the stream of delight, and such the behaviour both of herself and her ladies as builded their chastity, not upon waywardness, but choice of worthiness. So as it seemed, that court to have been the marriage place of love and virtue, and that herself was a Diana apparelled in the garments of Venus. And this, which fame only delivered unto me, for yet I have never seen her, I am the willinger to speak of to you, who I know her better, being your near neighbour, because you may see by her example, in herself wise, and of others beloved, that neither folly is the cause of vehement love, nor reproach the effect. For never, I think, was there any woman that with more unremovable determination gave herself to the counsel of love, after she had once set before her mind the worthiness of your cousin Amphialus, and yet is neither her wisdom doubted of, nor honour blemished. For, O God, what doth better become wisdom than to discern what is worthy the loving? What more agreeable to goodness than to love it so discerned? And what to greatness of heart than to be constant in it, once loved? But at that time that love of hers was not so publicly known as the death of Philoxenus and her search of Amphialus hath made it, but then seemed to have such leisure to send thither divers choice knights of her court, because they might bring her at least the knowledge, perchance the honour, of that triumph. Wherein so they behaved themselves as for 3 days they carried the prize, which being come from so far a place to disgrace her servant Palladius, who himself had never used arms, persuaded the queen Andromana to be content, for the honour's sake of her court, to suffer us two to have our horse and armour, that he, with us, might undertake the recovery of their lost honour. Which she granted, taking our oath to go no further than her son, nor ever to abandon him, which she did not more for saving him than keeping us. And yet, not satisfied with our oath, appointed a band of horsemen to have an eye that we should not go beyond appointed limits. We were willing to gratify the young prince, who we saw loved us, and so the 4th day of that exercise we came into the field, where I remember the manner was that the forenoon they should run at tilt, one after the other, the afternoon in a broad field, in manner of a battle, till either the stranger or that country knights won the field. Let it then suffice, most excellent lady, that you know the Corinthians that morning in the exercise, as they had done the days before, had the better, Palladius neither suffering us nor himself to take in hand the party till the afternoon, when we were to fight in troops, not differing otherwise from earnest, but that the sharpness of the weapons was taken away. But in the trial Palladius, especially led by Musidorus, and somewhat aided by me, himself truly behaving himself nothing like a beginner, brought the honour to rest itself that night on the Iberian side, and the next day, both morning and afternoon, being kept by our party, he, that saw the time fit for the delivery he intended, called unto us to follow him, which we, both bound by oath, and willing by good will, obeyed. And so, the guard not daring to interrupt us, he commanding passage, we went after him, upon the spur, to a little house in a forest near by, which he thought would be the fittest resting place, till we might go further from his mother's fury, whereat he was no less angry and ashamed than desirous to obey Zelmane. But his mother, understanding how we were conveyed away, pursued us, and overtook us in the kingdom of Bithynia, and regardless of another's dominions, set on us with about 80 horsemen. By Musidorus' incredible valour we had little to do to overcome weak wrong, and Palladius, heated by victory, pursued our assailers, when one of them, a special minion of Andromanas, with a traitorous blow slew his young prince. And this so wrought on us that many of his subjects' bodies we left there dead, to wait on him more faithfully in another world. All this while disdain, strengthened by the fury of a furious love, made Andromana stay to the last of the combat, and when she saw us light down to see what help we might do to the helpless Palladius, she came running madly unto us, then no less threatening when she had no more power to hurt. But when she perceived it was her only son that lay hurt, and that his hurt was so deadly as that already his life had lost the use of the reasonable and almost sensible part, then only did misfortune lay his own ugliness upon her fault, and make her see what she had done, and to what she had come, especially finding in us rather detestation than pity, considering the loss of that young prince, and resolution presently to depart, which still she laboured to stay. But deprived of all comfort, with eyes full of death, she ran to her son's dagger, and before we were aware of it, who else would have stayed it, strake herself a mortal wound. But then her love, though not her person, awaked pity in us, and I went to her while Musidorus laboured about Palladius. But the wound was past cure of a better surgeon than myself, so as I could but receive some few of her dying words, which were cursings of her ill-set affection, and wishing unto me many crosses and mischances in my love, whensoever I should love, wherein I fear and only fear that her prayer is from above granted. But the noise of this fight, and issue thereof, being blazed by the country people to some noblemen thereabouts, they came thither, and finding the wrong offered us, let us go on our journey, we having recommended those royal bodies unto them to be conveyed to the king of Iberia." With that Philoclea, seeing the tears stand in his eyes with remembrance of Palladius, but much more of that which thereupon grew, she would needs drink a kiss from those eyes, and he suck another from her lips, whereat she blushed, and yet kissed him again to hide her blushing, which had almost brought Pyrocles into another discourse, but that she with so sweet a rigour forbade him that he durst not rebel, though he found it great war to keep that peace, but was fain to go on in his story, for so she absolutely bade him, and he durst not know to disobey. Parting before the sun had much abased himself, we met a fair gentlewoman, one of the lovers of Pamphilus, to whom the inconstant man had betrothed himself, and who was about to slay herself, seeing that before his marriage day he had taken to wife Baccha, the most impudently unchaste woman of all Asia, as I had heard much blazed about. This lady Leucippe we in some sort comforted and conveyed to a house thereby dedicated to Vestal nuns, where she resolved to spend all her years in bewailing the wrong, and yet praying for the wrongdoer. The next morning there overtook us a young gentleman, for so he seemed to us, but indeed, sweet lady, it was the fair Zelmane, Plexirtus' daughter, whom, unconsulting affection, unfortunately born to mewards, had made borrow so much of her natural modesty as to leave her more decent raiments, and taking occasion of Andromane's tumultuous pursuing us, had apparelled herself like a page, with a pitiful cruelty cutting off her golden hair, leaving nothing but the short curls to cover that noble head, but that she wear upon it a fair head-piece, a shield at her back, and a lance in her hand, else disarmed. Her apparel of white, wrought upon with broken knots, her horse fair and lusty, which she rid so as might show a fearful boldness, daring to do that which she knew that she knew not how to do, and the sweetness of her countenance did give such a grace to what she did, that it did make handsome the unhandsomeness, and make the eye force the mind to believe that there was a praise in that unskilfulness. But she straight approached me, and with few words, which borrowed the help of her countenance to make themselves understood, she desired me to accept her into my service, telling me she was a nobleman's son of Iberia, her name Daiphantus, who, having seen what I had done in that court, had stolen from her father to follow me. I inquired the particularities of the manner of Andromane's following me, which by her I understood, she hiding nothing but her sex from me, and still methought I had seen that face. But the great alteration of her fortune made her far distant from my memory. But liking very well the young gentleman, such I took her to be, admitted this Daiphantus about me, who well showed there is no service like his that serves because he loves. For though born of prince's blood, brought up with tenderest education, unapt to service because a woman, and full of thoughts because in a strange estate, yet love enjoined such diligence that no apprentice, no bondslave, could ever be by fear more ready at all commandments than that young princess was. How often, alas, did her eyes say unto me that they loved, and yet I, not looking for such a matter, had not my conceit open to understand them. How often would she come creeping to me, between gladness to be near me and fear to offend me. Truly I remember that then I marvelled to see her receive my commandments with sighs, and yet do them with cheerfulness, sometimes answering me in such riddles, as I then thought a childish inexperience, but, since returning to my remembrance, they have come more clear unto my knowledge. And pardon me only, dear lady, that I use many words, for her affection to me deserves of me an affectionate speech. In such sort did she serve me in the kingdom of Bithynia, that we brought to an end a cruel war between the king and his brother. This done, we intended to ease the care of our father and mother, when we were guided by the noise of a great fight to a pleasant valley, which, like one of those circuses in great cities, doth give a pleasant sight for running horses, hemmed in by woody hills, as if nature therein had made a place for beholders. There beheld we one of the cruellest fights between two knights that ever hath adorned the most martial story. So as I must confess a while we stood bewondered, another while delighted, with the rare beauty thereof, till seeing such streams of blood as threatened a drowning of life, we galloped toward them to part them. But we were prevented by a dozen armed knights, or rather villains, who, using this time of their extreme feebleness, altogether set upon them. But common danger brake off particular discord, so that, though with a dying weakness, with a lively courage they resisted, and by our help drave away or slew those murdering attempters, among whom we happed to take alive the principal. But going to disarm those two excellent knights, we found, with no less wonder to us than astonishment to themselves, that they were the two valiant and indeed famous brothers, Tydeus and Telenor, whose adventure, as afterwards we made that ungracious wretch confess, had thus fallen out. After the noble Prince Leonatus had by his father's death succeeded in the kingdom of Galatia, he, forgetting all former injuries, had received that naughty Plexirtus into a stray degree of favour, his goodness being as apt to be deceived as the other's craft was to deceive, till by plain proof, finding that the ungrateful man went about to poison him, yet would he not suffer his kindness to be overcome, not by justice itself, but calling him to him, use words to this purpose. Plexirtus, said he, this wickedness is found by thee. No good deeds of mine have been able to keep it down in thee. All men counsel me to take away thy life, likely to bring forth nothing but as dangerous as wicked effects. But I cannot find it in my heart, remembering what father's son thou art. But since it is the violence of ambition, which perchance pulls thee from thine own judgment, I will see whether the satisfying that may quiet the ill working of thy spirits. Not far hence is the great city of Trebizond, which with the territory about it anciently pertained unto this crown, now unjustly possessed and as unjustly abused by those who have neither title to hold it nor virtue to rule it. To the conquest of that for thyself I will lend thee force and give thee my right. Go therefore, and with less unnaturalness glut thy ambition there, and that done, if it be possible, learn virtue. Plexirtus, mingling forsworn excuses with false-met promises, gladly embraced the offer, and hastily sending back for those two brothers, who at that time were with us succouring that gracious Queen Erona, by their virtue chiefly, if not only, obtained the conquest of that goodly dominion, which indeed done by them gave them such an authority that, though he reigned, they in effect ruled, most men honouring them because they only deserved honour, and many thinking therein to please Plexirtus, considering how much he was bound unto them, while they likewise, with a certain sincere boldness of self-warranting friendship, accepted all openly and plainly, thinking nothing should ever by Plexirtus be thought too much in them, since all they were was his. But he, who by the rules of his own mind could construe no other end of men's doing but self-seeking, suddenly feared what they could do, and as suddenly suspected what they would do, and as suddenly hated them, as having both might and mind to do. But dreading their power, standing so strongly in their own valour and others' affection, he does not take open way against them, and as hard it was to take a secret, they being so continually followed by the best and every way ablest of that region, and therefore used his devilish sleight, which I will tell you, not doubting, most wicked man, to turn their own friendship toward him to their own destruction. He, knowing that they well knew there was no friendship between him and the new king of Pontus, never since he succoured Leonatus and us to his overthrow, gave them to understand that of late there had passed secret defiance between them to meet privately at a place appointed, which though not so fit a thing for men of their greatness, yet was his honour so engaged as he could not go back. Yet feigning to find himself weak by some counterfeit infirmity, the day drawing near, he requested each of them to go in his stead, making either of them swear to keep the matter secret, even from each other, delivering the self-same particularities to both, but that he told Tydeus the king would meet him in a blue armour, and Telenor that it was a black armour, and with wicked subtlety, as if it had been so appointed, caused Tydeus to take a black armour, and Telenor a blue, appointing them ways how to go, so as he knew they should not meet till they came to the place appointed, where each promised to keep silence, lest the king should discover it was not Plexirtus. And there in await had he laid these murtherers, that who overlived the other should by them be dispatched, he not daring trust more than those with that enterprise, and yet thinking them too few till themselves, by themselves, were weakened. This we learned chiefly by the chief of those way-beaters after the death of those two worthy brothers, whose love was no less than their valour. But well we might find much thereof by their pitiful lamentation, when they knew their mismeeting, and saw each other, in despite of the surgery we could do unto them, striving who should run fastest to the goal of death, each bewailing the other, and more dying in the other than in himself, cursing their own hands for doing, and their breasts for not sooner suffering, detesting their unfortunately spent time in having served so ungrateful a tyrant, and accusing their folly in having believed he could faithfully love, who did not love faithfulness, wishing us to take heed how we placed our goodwill upon any other ground than proof of virtue, since length of acquaintance, mutual secrecies, nor height of benefits could bind a savage heart, no man being good to other that is not good in himself. Then, while any hope was, beseeching us to leave the care of him that besought, and only look to the other. But when they found by themselves and us no possibility, they desired to be joined, and so, embracing and craving that pardon each of other which they denied to themselves, they gave us a most sorrowful spectacle of their death, leaving few in the world behind them their matches in anything, if they had soon enough known the ground and limits of friendship. But with woeful hearts we caused those bodies to be conveyed to the next town of Bithynia, where we, learning thus much as I have told you, caused the wicked historian to conclude his story with his own well-deserved death. But then, I must tell you, I found such woeful countenances in Daiphantus, that I could not but such marvel, finding them continue beyond the first assault of pity, how the case of strangers, for further I did not conceive, could so deeply pierce. But the truth indeed is, that partly with the shame and sorrow she took of her father's faultiness, partly with the fear that the hate I conceived against him would utterly disgrace her in my opinion, whensoever I should know her, so vehemently perplexed her, that her fair colour decayed, and daily and hastily grew into the very extreme working of sorrowfulness, which oft I sought to learn and help. But she, as fearful as loving, still concealed it, and so decaying still more and more in the excellency of her fairness, but that whatsoever weakness took away, pity seemed to add, yet still she forced herself to wait on me, with such care and diligence as might well show had been taught in no other school but love. While we, returning again to embark ourselves for Greece, understood that the mighty Otanes, brother to Barzanes slain by Musidorus in the battle of the 6 princes, had entered upon the kingdom of Pontus, partly upon the pretences he had to the crown, but principally because he would revenge upon him, whom he knew we loved, the loss of his brother, thinking, as indeed he had cause, that wheresoever we were, hearing of his extremity, we would come to relieve him, in spite whereof he doubted not to prevail, not only upon the confidence of his own virtue and power, but especially because he had in his company 2 mighty giants, sons to a couple whom we slew in the same realm, they having been absent at their father's death, and now returned, willingly entered into his service, hating more than he, both us and that king of Pontus. We therefore with all speed went thitherward, but by the way this fell out, which whensoever I remember without sorrow, I must forget withal all humanity. Poor Daiphantus fell extreme sick, yet would needs conquer the delicacy of her constitution, and force herself to wait on me, till one day, going toward Pontus, we met one who in great haste went seeking for Tydeus and Telenor, whose death as yet was not known unto the messenger, who being their servant, and knowing how dearly they loved Plexirtus, brought them word how, since their departing, Plexirtus was in present danger of a cruel death, if by the violentness of one of the best knights of the world he were not rescued. We inquired no further of the matter, being glad he should now to his loss find what an unprofitable treason it had been unto him to dismember himself of 2 such friends, and so let the messenger part, not sticking to make him know his master's destruction by the falsehood of Plexirtus. But the grief of that, finding a body already brought to the last degree of weakness, so overwhelmed the little remnant of the spirits left in Daiphantus, that she fell suddenly into deadly swoonings, never coming to herself, but that withal she returned to make most pitiful lamentations, most strange unto us, because we were far from guessing the ground thereof. But finding her sickness such as began to print death in her eyes, we made all haste possible to convey her to the next town. But before we could lay her on a bed, both we and she might find in herself that the harbingers of over-hasty death had prepared his lodging in that dainty body, which she undoubtedly feeling, with a weak cheerfulness, showed comfort therein, and then, desiring us both to come near her, and that nobody else might be present, with pale, and yet even in paleness lovely lips, "Now or never, and never indeed but now, is it time for me," said she, "to speak, and I thank death, which gives me leave to discover that the suppressing whereof perchance hath been the sharpest spur that hath hasted my race to this end. Know then, my lords, and especially you, my lord and master Pyrocles, that your page Daiphantus is the unfortunate Zelmane, who for your sake caused my as unfortunate lover and cousin Palladius to leave his father's court, and consequently both him and my aunt his mother to lose their lives. For your sake myself have become of a princess a page, and for your sake have put off the apparel of a woman, and if you judge not more mercifully, the modesty." We were amazed at her speech, and then had, as it were, new eyes given us to perceive that which before had been a present stranger to our minds. For indeed forthwith we knew it to be the face of Zelmane, whom before we had known in the court of Iberia. And sorrow and pity laying her pain upon me, I comforted her the best I could, by the tenderness of goodwill, pretending, indeed, better hope than I had of her recovery. But she, that had inward ambassadors from the tyrant that shortly would oppress her, "No, my dear master," said she, "I neither hope nor desire to live. I know you would never have loved me," and with that word she wept, "nor, alas, had it been reason you should, considering many ways my unworthiness. It sufficeth me that the strange course I have taken shall to your remembrance witness my love. And yet this breaking of my heart, before I would discover my pain, will make you, I hope, think that I was not altogether unmodest. Think of me so, dear master, and that thought shall be my life." And with that, languishingly looking upon me, "And I pray you," said she, "even by these dying eyes of mine, which are only sorry to die because they shall lose your sight, and by these polled locks of mine, which, while they were long, were the ornament of my sex, now in their short curls the testimony of my servitude, and by the service I have done you, which God knows has been full of love, think of me, after my death, with kindness, though you cannot with love. And whensoever you shall make any other lady happy with your well-placed affection, if you tell her my folly, I pray you speak of it not with scorn, but with pity. I assure you, dear princess of my life, for how could it be otherwise, her words and her manner, with the lively consideration of her love, so pierced me, that though I had divers griefs before, yet methought I never felt till then how much sorrow enfeebled all resolution. For I could not choose but yield to the weakness of abundant weeping, in truth with such grief that I could willingly at that time have changed lives with her. But when she saw my tears, "O God," said she, "how largely am I recompensed for my losses! Why then," said she, "I may take boldness to make some requests unto you." I besought her to do, vowing the performance, though my life were the price thereof. She showed great joy. "The first," said she, "is this, that you will pardon my father the displeasure you have justly conceived against him, and for this once succour him out of the danger wherein he is. I hope he will amend, and I pray you, whensoever you remember him to be the faulty Plexirtus, remember withal that he is Zelmane's father. The second is that when you come once into Greece, you will take unto yourself this name, though unlucky, of Daiphantus, and vouchsafe to be called by it, for so shall I be sure you shall have cause to remember me. And let it please your noble cousin to be called Palladius, that I may do that right to that poor prince. that his name yet may live upon the earth in so excellent a person. And so between you, I trust sometimes your unlucky page shall be, perhaps with a sigh, mentioned. Lastly, let me be buried here obscurely, not suffering my friends to know my fortune, till, when you are safely returned to your own country, you cause my bones to be conveyed thither, and laid, I beseech you, in some place where yourself vouchsafe sometimes to resort. Alas, small petitions for such a suitor, which yet she so earnestly craved that I was fain to swear the accomplishment. And then kissing me, and often desiring me not to condemn her of lightness, in mine arms she delivered her pure soul to the purest place, leaving me as full of agony as kindness, pity, and sorrow could make an honest heart. For I must confess for true, that if my stars had not wholly reserved me for you, there else perhaps I might have loved, and, which had been most strange, begun my love after death. Whereof, let it be the less marvel, because somewhat she did resemble you, though as far short of your perfection, as herself dying was of herself flourishing. Yet something there was, which, when I saw a picture of yours, brought again her figure into my remembrance, and made my heart as apt to receive the wound as the power of your beauty with unresistible force to pierce. But we, in woeful and yet private manner burying her, performed her commandment, and then, inquiring of her father's estate, certainly learned that he was presently to be succoured, or by death to pass the need of succour. Therefore we determined to divide ourselves, I, according to my vow, to help him, and Musidorus toward the king of Pontus, who stood in no less need than immediate succour. And, even ready to depart one from the other, there came a messenger from him, who, after some inquiry, found us, giving us to understand that he, trusting upon us too, had appointed the combat between him and us against Otanes and the two giants. Now the day was so accorded as it was impossible for me both to succour Plexirtus and be there where my honour was not only so far engaged, but by the strange working of unjust fortune, I was to leave the standing by Musidorus, whom better than myself I loved, to go save him whom, for just causes, I hated. But my promise given, and given to Zelmane, and to Zelmane dying, prevailed more with me than my friendship to Musidorus, though certainly I may affirm nothing had so great rule in my thoughts as that. But my promise carried me the easier, because Musidorus himself would not suffer me to break it. And so, with heavy minds, more careful each of others' success than of our own, we parted. The virtuous Leonatus, understanding too so good friends of his were to be in that danger, would perforce be one himself, where he did valiantly, and so did the king of Pontus. But the truth is, that they both being sore hurt, the incomparable Musidorus finished the combat by the death of both the giants, and the taking of Otanes prisoner, to whom as he gave his life, so he got a noble friend, for so he gave his word to be, and he is well known to think himself greater in being subject to that, than in the greatness of his principality. But thither, understanding of our being there, flocked great multitudes of many great persons, and even of princes, especially those whom we had made beholding unto us, as the kings of Phrygia, Bithynia, with those two hurt of Pontus and Galatia, and Otanes, the prisoner by Musidorus set free. And thither came Plexirtus of Trebizond, and Antiphilus, then king of Lydia, with as many more great princes, drawn either by our reputation or by willingness to acknowledge themselves obliged unto us for what we had done for the others. So as in those parts of the world, I think in many hundreds of years, there was not seen so royal an assembly, where nothing was let pass to do us the highest honours, which such persons, who might command both purses and inventions, could perform, all from all sides bringing unto us right royal presents, which we, to avoid both unkindness and importunity, liberally received, and not content therewith, would needs accept as from us their crowns, and acknowledge to hold them of us, with many other excessive honours, which would not suffer the measure of this short leisure to describe unto you. But we, quickly aweary thereof, hasted to Greeceward, led thither partly with the desire of our parents, but hastened principally because I understood that Anaxius, with open mouth of defamation, had gone thither to seek me, and was now come to Peloponnesus, where from court to court he made inquiry of me, doing yet himself so noble deeds as might hap to authorize an ill opinion of me. We therefore suffered but short delays, desiring to take this country in our way, so renowned over the world that no prince could pretend height, nor beggar lowness to bar him from the sound thereof. Renowned indeed, not so much for the ancient praises attributed thereunto, as for the having in it Argalus and Amphialus, two knights of such rare prowess as we desired especially to know, and yet by far not so much for that as, without suffering of the comparison for the beauty of you and your sister, which makes all indifferent judges that speak thereof account this country as a temple of deities. But these causes, indeed, moving us to come by this land, we embarked ourselves in the next port, whither all those princes, saving Antiphilus, who returned, as he pretended, not able to tarry longer from Arona, conveyed us, and there found we a ship most royally furnished by Plexirtus, who had made all things so proper as well for our defence as ease, that all the other princes greatly commended him for it, who seemed a quite altered man, had nothing but repentance in his eyes, friendship in his gesture, and virtue in his mouth, so that we, who had promised the sweet Zelmane to pardon him, now not only forgave, but began to favour, persuading ourselves with a youthful credulity that perchance things were not so evil as we took them, and as it were desiring our own memory that it might be so. Committing ourselves to the uncertain discretion of the wind, we, then determining, as soon as we came to Greece, to take the names of Daiphantus and Palladius, as well for our own promise to Zelmane, as because we desired to come unknown into Greece, left the Asian shore, full of princely persons, who even upon their knees recommended our safeties to the devotion of their chief desires, among whom none hath been so officious, though I dare affirm, or quite contrary to his unfaithfulness, as Plexirtus. End of Book 2, Part 5. Book 2, Part 6 of The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia by Philip Sidney. Book 2, Part 6. And so, having sailed almost 2 days, looking for nothing but when we might look upon the land, a grave man, whom we had seen of great trust with Plexirtus, and was sent as our principal guide, came unto us, and, with a certain kind manner, mixed with shame and repentance, began to tell us that he had taken such a love unto us, considering our youth and fame, that though he were a servant, and a servant of such trust about Plexirtus, as that he had committed unto him even those secrets of his heart, which abhorred all other knowledge, yet he rather chose to reveal at this time a most pernicious counsel than, by concealing it, bring to ruin those whom he could not choose but honour. So went he on, and told us that Plexirtus, in hope thereby to have Artaxia, endowed with the great kingdom of Armenia, to his wife, had given him order, when we were near Greece, to find some opportunity to murder us, bidding him to take us asleep, because he had seen what we could do waking. Now, sir, said he, I would rather lose my life than have my remembrance poisoned with such a mischief. Therefore stand upon your guard, and what I can do for your help you shall see, if it come to the push, by me performed. And truly, when we came within half a day's sailing of the shore, the captain, who had been a pirate, and in that much blooded, set upon us, crying that if Plexirtus desired he would kill God himself. So straight against the captain we, time being indeed come, went. He was environed with soldiers and mariners, yet some, either in doubt of the king, or in liking for us, drew their swords on our side, and it quickly grew a confused fight. From the highest to the lowest part of the ship there was no place left, without cries of murdering or of murdered persons. And after many were slain, while the little remnant, like the children of Cadmus, continued to slay one another, fire, either by the desperate malice of some, or accidentally, broke out in the ship, and soon the mast fell overboard, and the fire going nearer us, it was not only terrible in respect of what we were to attend, but insupportable through the heat of it, so that we were constrained to bide it no longer, but disarming, and stripping ourselves, and laying ourselves upon such things as we thought might help our swimming to the land, too far for our own strength to bear us, my cousin and I threw ourselves into the sea. But I had swum a very little way when I felt, by reason of a wound I had, that I should not be able to abide the travel, and therefore seeing the mast, whose tackling had been burnt off, float clear from the ship, I swam unto it, and getting on it I found mine own sword, which by chance, when I threw it away, caught by a piece of canvas, had hung to the mast. I was glad, because I loved it well, but gladder when I saw at the other end the captain of the ship, and of all this mischief, who having a long pike, belike had borne himself up with that till he had set himself upon the mast. But when I perceived him, Villain, said I, dost thou think to overlive so many honest men whom thy falsehood hath brought to destruction? With that, bestriding the mast, I gat by little and little towards him, after such manner as boys are wont, if ever you saw that sport when they ride the wild mare. And he, perceiving my intention, like a fellow that had much more courage than honesty, set himself to resist. But I had in short space gotten within him, and giving him a sound blow, sent him to feed fishes. But there myself remained, until by pirates I was taken up, and among them again taken prisoner, and brought into Laconia. But what, said Philoclea, became of your cousin Musidorus? Lost, said Pyrocles. Ah, my Pyrocles, said Philoclea, I am glad I have taken you. I perceive you lovers do not always say truly, as though I knew not your cousin Dorus the shepherd. Life of my desires, said Pyrocles, what is mine even to my soul is yours, but the secret of my friend is not mine. But if you know so much, then I may truly say he is lost, since he is no more his own. But I perceive your noble sister and you are great friends, and well doth it become you so to be. But go forward, dear Pyrocles. I long to hear out till your meeting me, for there to meward is the best part of your story. Ah, sweet Philoclea, said Pyrocles, do you think I can think so precious leisure as this well spent in talking? Are your eyes a fit book, think you, to read a tale upon? Is my love quiet enough to be an historian? Dear princess, be gracious unto me. And then he fain would have remembered to have forgot himself. But she, with a sweetly disobeying grace, desired him that her desire, once for ever, might serve that no spot might disgrace that love, which shortly she hoped should be to the world warrantable. Fain he would not have heard till she threatened anger, and then the poor lover durst not, because he durst not. Nay, I pray thee, dear Pyrocles, said she, let me have my story. Sweet princess, said he, give my thoughts a little respite, and if it please you, since this time must be so spoiled, yet it shall suffer the less harm if you vouchsafe to bestow your voice, and let me know how the good Queen Erona was betrayed into such danger, and why Plangus sought me, for indeed I should pity greatly any mischance fallen to that princess. I will, said Philoclea, smiling, so you give me your word, your hands shall be quiet auditors. They shall, said he, because subject. Then began she to speak, but with so pretty and delightful a majesty, when she set her countenance to tell the matter, that Pyrocles could not choose but rebel so far as to kiss her. She would have pulled her head away and spake, but while she spake he kissed, and it seemed he fed upon her words. But she gat away. How will you have your discourse, said she, without you let my lips alone? He yielded and took her hand. On this, said he, will I revenge my wrong, and so began to make much of that hand. But her tale and his delight were interrupted by Miso, who was sent thither by Gynecia, who had been vexed by a fearful dream of Zelmane. But Philoclea telling her she was there by her father's desire, Miso left them. To them soon came the great and wretched lady Gynecia, divided between those two devils, love and jealousy. O jealousy, said she to herself, the frenzy of wise folks, the well-wishing spite, and unkind carefulness, the self-punishment for others' fault, and self-misery in others' happiness, the cousin of envy, daughter of love, and mother of hate. How couldst thou so quietly get thee a seat in the unquiet heart of Gynecia? Gynecia, said she, sighing, thought wise, and once virtuous, alas, it is thy breeder's power which plants thee there. It is the flaming agony of affection that works the chilling access of thy fever, in such sort that nature gives place. The growing of my daughter seems the decay of myself, the blessings of a mother turned to the curses of a competitor, and the fair face of Philoclea appears more horrible in my sight than the image of death. Yet for Zelmane's sake she used no harder words to her than to bid her go home and accompany her solitary father. Then began she to display to Zelmane the storehouse of her deadly desires, when suddenly the confused rumour of a mutinous multitude gave just occasion to Zelmane to break off any such conference, for well she found they were not friendly voices they heard, and to retire with as much diligence as conveniently they could towards the lodge. Yet before they could win the lodge by 20 paces, they were overtaken by an unruly sort of clowns and other rebels, which, like a violent flood, were carried they themselves knew not whither. But as soon as they came within perfect discerning these ladies, like enraged beasts, without respect of their estates or pity of their sex, they began to run against them, as right villains, thinking ability to do hurt to be a great advancement. Yet so many as they were, so many almost were their minds, all knit together only in madness. Some cried take, some kill, some save, but even they that cried save ran for company with them that meant to kill. Every one commanded, none obeyed. He only seemed chief captain that was most rageful. Zelmane, whose virtuous courage was ever awake, drew out her sword, which upon those ill-armed churls, giving as many wounds as blows, and as many deaths almost as wounds, lightning courage and thundering smart upon them, kept them at a bay, while the two ladies gat themselves into the lodge, out of which Basilius, having put on an armour long untried, came to prove his authority among his subjects, or at least to adventure his life with his dear mistress, to whom he brought a shield, while the ladies trembling attended the issue of this dangerous adventure. But Zelmane made them perceive the odds between an eagle and a kite, with such nimble stayedness and an assured nimbleness, that while one was running back for fear, his fellow had her sword in his guts. And by was both her heart and help well increased by the coming of Dorus, who, having been making of hurdles for his master's sheep, heard the horrible cries of this mad multitude, and having straight represented before the eyes of his careful love the peril wherein the soul of his soul might be, he went to Pamela's lodge, but found her in a cave hard by with Mopsa and Dametas, who at that time would not have opened the entry to his father, and therefore leaving them there, as in a place safe, both for being strong and unknown, he ran as the noise guided him. But when he saw his friend in such danger among them, anger and contempt, asking no counsel but of courage, made him run among them with no other weapon but his sheep-hook, and with that overthrowing one of the villains, took away a 2-hand sword from him, and withal helped him for ever being ashamed of losing it. Then lifting up his brave head, and flashing terror into their faces, he made arms and legs go complain to the earth how evil their masters had kept them. Yet the multitude still growing, and they, very killing, wearying them, fearing lest in long fight they should be conquered by conquering, they drew back towards the lodge, but drew back in such sort that still their terror went forward like a valiant mastiff, whom when his father pulls back by the tail from the bear, with whom he had already interchanged a hateful embracement, though his pace be backward, his gesture is forward, his teeth and his eyes threatening more in the retiring than they did in the advancing, so guided they themselves homeward, never stepping a step backward, but that they proved themselves masters of the ground where they stepped. But the fury of these common men was such that the lodge afforded no security against them, for never bees made such a confused humming. The town dwellers were for putting down imposts, the country fellows for laying out of commons, Some would have Basilius keep his court in one place, some in another. All cried to have new counsellors and the treasure looked to. The peasants would have all the gentlemen destroyed. The citizens, especially the cooks and barbers, and those that lived most on gentlemen, would have them reformed. But no confusion was greater than that of particular men's likings and dislikings, and some went about to destroy the lodge with pickaxe and fire, when Zelmane, used to such humours, with an angerless bravery thus spake to them: "An unused thing it is, O Arcadians, and I think not hitherto seen, that a woman should give public counsel to men, and a stranger to the country people. But since it is so, I would tell you that none lodge here but those whom you have cause to love and no cause to hate, your prince, princess, and their children, excepting myself. Is it I, then, O Arcadians, against whom your anger is turned?" And so she continued, the action that she used being beautified by nature, till the sweet clearness of her voice, rising and falling, as the nature of the word and the efficacy of the matter imported, had so persuaded them that some of them began to waver. Then, thinking that in such mutinies it were well some should countervail their trespass, "Loyal Arcadians," said she, "now do I offer unto you the manifesting of your duties. All those that have taken arms for the prince's safety, let them turn their backs to the gate with their weapons bent again, such as would hurt his sacred person. O weak trust of the many-headed multitude, whom inconstancy only doth guide to well-doing! Who can set confidence there where company takes away shame, and each may lay the fault on his fellow?" So said a crafty fellow among them, named Clinias, to himself, when he saw the word no sooner out of Zelmane's mouth, but that there were some shouts of joy, with "God save Basilius!" and divers of them with much jollity grown to be his guard, that but little before meant to be his murderers. This Clinias in his youth had been a scholar, so far as to learn rather words than manners, and of words rather plenty than order, and oft had used to be an actor in tragedies, where he had learned, besides a slidingness of language, acquaintance with many passions, and to frame his face to bear the figure of them, long used to the eyes and ears of men, and to reckon no fault but shamefastness in nature, a most notable coward, and yet more strangely than rarely venturous in privy practices. This fellow was become of near trust to Cecropia, Amphialus his mother, so that he was privy to all the mischievous devices wherewith she went about to ruin Basilius and his children for the advancing of her son. And though his education had made him full of tongue, yet his love to be doing taught him in any evil to be secret, and had by his mistress been used, ever since the strange retiring of Basilius, to whisper rumours into the people's ears, and this time, finding great aptness in the multitude, was one of the chief that set them in the uproar, though quite without the consent of Amphialus, who would not for all the kingdoms of the world so have adventured the life of Philoclea. But now, perceiving the flood of their fury began to ebb, he thought it policy to take the first of the tide, so that no man cried louder than he upon Basilius. Some of the lustiest rebels not agreeing with the rest, a fight again was set up, the king's party driving the rest away, and Zelmane striking a farmer dead with her sword, as she had before done with her eyes. Clinias fought on the side of Basilius, and he, imagining him to be one of the chief that had bred the good alteration, after giving the rebels a general pardon, demanded of Clinias how it was that this frenzy had entered into the minds of the people. Whereon Clinias, purposing to tell the truth of all, saving what did touch himself or Cecropia, said that it was chiefly because he, Basilius, retired from the government and withdrew from the people. With that the fellow did wring his hands and rang out tears, so that Basilius, who was not the sharpest piercer into mass minds, took a good liking to him. But before Clinias went away, certain of the shepherds being come, for that day was appointed for their pastorals, Basilius sent one of them to Philanax, and another to other principal noblemen and cities thereabouts, to make thorough inquiry of this uproar, and withal to place such garrisons in all the towns and villages near unto him, that he might thereafter keep his solitary lodge in more security, upon the making of a fire or ringing of a bell, having them in a readiness for him. This Clinias, having his ear one way when his eye was another, had perceived, and therefore hasted away with mind to tell Cecropia that she was to take some speedy resolution, or else it were danger those examinations would both discover and ruin her, and so went his way, leaving that little company with embracements, and praising of Zelmane's excellent proceeding, to show that no decking sets forth anything so much as affection. But as they were in the midst of those unfeigned ceremonies, a gitten ill played on, accompanied with a hoarse voice, who seemed to sing Morga of the Muses, and to be merry in spite of fortune, made them look the way of the ill-noised song. They had soon found it was Dametas, who came with no less lifted up countenance than if he had passed over the bellies of all his enemies, so wise a point he thought he had performed in using the natural strength of the cave. But never was it his doing to come so soon thence till the coast were more assuredly clear, for it was a rule with him that after a great storm there ever fall a few drops before it be fully finished. But Pamela, who had now experienced how much care doth solicit a lover's heart, used this occasion of going to her parents and sister, indeed as well for that cause as being unquiet, till her eye might be assured how her shepherd had gone through the danger. But Basilius, with the sight of Pamela, of whom almost his head, otherwise occupied, had left the wonted remembrance, was suddenly stricken into a devout kind of admiration, remembering the oracle, which, according to the fawning humour of false hope, he interpreted now his own to his own best, and with the willing blindness of affection, because his mind ran wholly upon Zelmane, he thought the gods in their oracles did principally mind her. But as he was deeply thinking of the matter, one of the shepherds told him that Philanax was already come with 100 horse in his company. For having by chance rid not far off the little desert, he had heard of this uproar, and so was come upon the spur, gathering a company of gentlemen as fast as he could to the succour of his master. Basilius was glad of it, but not willing to have him nor any other of the noblemen see his mistress, he himself went out of the lodge, and so giving order unto him of placing garrisons and examining these matters, and Philanax, with humble earnestness, beginning to entreat him to leave off this solitary course, which already had been so dangerous unto him. Well, said Basilius, it may be ere long I will condescend unto your desire. In the meantime, take you the best order you can to keep me safe in my solitariness. But, said he, do you remember how earnestly you wrote unto me that I should not be moved by that oracle's authority, which brought me to this resolution? Full well, sir, answered Philanax, for though it pleased you not as then to let me know what the oracle's words were, yet all oracles hold in my conceit, one degree of reputation. It sufficed me to know it was but an oracle which led you from your own course. Well, said Basilius, I will now tell you the words, which before I thought not good to do, because when all the events fall out, as some already have done, I may charge you with your incredulity. So he repeated them in this sort: Thy elder care shall from thy careful face by princely mean be stol'n and yet not lost. Thy younger shall with nature's bliss embrace an uncouth love which nature hateth most. Both they themselves unto such two shall wed, who at thy bier, as at a bar, shall plead why thee, a living man, they had made dead. In thine own seat a foreign state shall sit, and ere that all these blows thy head do hit, thou with thy wife adultery shall commit. For sooth, said he, when I told you that some supernatural cause sent me strange visions, which being confirmed with presagious chances, I had gone to Delphos, and there received this answer, you replied unto me that the only supernatural causes were the humours of my body, which bred such melancholy dreams, and that both they framed a mind full of conceits, apt to make presages of things which in themselves were merely chanceable. And withal, as I say, you remember what you wrote unto me touching the authority of the oracle. But now I have some notable trial of the truth thereof, which hereafter I will more largely communicate unto you. Only now know that the thing I most feared is already performed. I mean that a foreign state should possess my throne, for that hath been done by Zelmane, but not as I feared to my ruin, but to my preservation. But when he had once named Zelmane, that name was as good as a pulley to make the clock of his praises run on in such sort that Philanax found was more exquisite than the only admiration of virtue breedeth, which his faithful heart, inwardly repining at, made him shrink away as soon as he could to go about the other matters of importance which Basilius had enjoined unto him. Basilius returned into the lodge, thus by himself construing the oracle, that in that he said his elder care should by princely mean be stolen away from him, and yet not lost, it was now performed, since Zelmane had, as it were, robbed from him the care of his first begotten child. Yet was it not lost, since in his heart the ground of it remained. That his younger should with nature's bliss embrace the love of Zelmane, because he had so commanded her for his sake to do, yet should it be with as much hate of nature, for being so hateful and opposite to the jealousy he thought her mother had of him. The sitting in his seat he deemed by her already performed, but that which most comforted him was his interpretation of the adultery, which he thought he should commit with Zelmane, whom afterwards he should have to his wife. The point of his daughter's marriage, because it threatened his death withal, he determined to prevent with keeping them while he lived unmarried. But having, as he thought, gotten thus much understanding of the oracle, he determined for 3 days after to perform certain rites to Apollo. As soon as he had ended his devotion, all the privileged shepherds being now come, knowing well enough he might lay all his care upon Philanax, he was willing to sweeten the taste of this past tumult with some rural pastimes, for which, while the shepherds prepared themselves in the best manner, Basilius took his daughter Philoclea aside, and with such haste as if his ears hunted for words, desired to know how she had found Zelmane. She humbly answered him, according to the agreement betwixt them, that thus much for her sake Zelmane was content to descend from her former resolution, as to hear him whensoever he would speak. And further than that, she said, as Zelmane had not granted, so she neither did nor ever would desire. Basilius kissed her with more than fatherly thanks, and straight, like a hard-kept ward new come to his lands, would fain have used the benefit of that grant in laying his sickness before his only physician. But Zelmane, that had not yet fully determined with herself how to bear herself toward him, made him in few words understand that the time, in respect of the company, was unfit for such a parley, and therefore, to keep his brains the busier, letting him understand what she had learned of his daughter's touching Erona's distress, whom in her travels she had known and been greatly beholding to, she desired him to finish the rest, for so far as Plangus had told him. Because she said, and she said truly, she was full of care for that lady, whose desert, only except an overbase choice, was nothing agreeable to misfortune. Basilius, glad that she would command him anything, but more glad that, in excusing the unfitness of that time, she argued an intention to grant a fitter, obeyed her in this manner. Madam, said he, it is very true that, since years enable me to judge what is or is not to be pitied, I never saw anything that more moved me to justify a vehement compassion in myself than the estate of that prince whom, strong against all his own afflictions, which yet were great, as I perceive you have heard, yet true and noble love had so pulled down as to lie under sorrow for another. But then, to leave that unrepeated which I find my daughters have told you, it may please you to understand, since it pleaseth you to demand, that Antiphilus being crowned, and so left by the famous princes Musidorus and Pyrocles, led thence by the challenge of Anaxius, who is now in these provinces of Greece, making a dishonourable inquiry after that excellent prince Pyrocles already perished. Antiphilus, I say, being crowned and delivered from the presence of those two, whose virtues, while they were present, like good schoolmasters, suppressed his vanities, he had not strength of mind enough in him to make long delay of discovering what manner of man he was. But straight, like one carried up to so high a place that he loseth the discerning of the ground over which he is, so was his mind lifted so far beyond the level of his own discourse that, remembering only that himself was in the high seat of a king, he could not perceive that he was a king of reasonable creatures, who would quickly scorn follies and repine at injuries. But imagining no so true property of sovereignty as to do what he listed, and to list whatsoever pleased his fancy, he quickly made his kingdom a tennis court, where his subjects should be the balls, not in truth cruelly, but licentiously abusing them, presuming so far upon himself that what he did was liked of everybody, nay, that his disgraces were favours, and all because he was a king. Then vainness, a meagre friend to gratefulness, brought him so to despise Erona, as of whom he had received no benefit, that within half a year's marriage he began to pretend barrenness, and making first an unlawful law of having more wives than one, he, still keeping Erona under hand, by messages sought Artaxia, who, no less hating him than loving, as unlucky a choice, the naughty king Plexirtus, yet, to bring to pass what she purposed, was content to train him into false hopes, till already his imagination had crowned him king of Armenia, and had made that but the foundation of more and more monarchies, as if fortune had only gotten eyes to cherish him. Poor Erona to all this obeyed, either vehemency of affection making her stoop to so overbase a servitude, or, astonished with an unlooked-for fortune, dull to any behooful resolution, or, as many times it falls out even in great hearts, when they can accuse none but themselves, desperately bent to maintain it. For so went she on in that way of her love, that poor lady. To be beyond all other examples of ill-set affection, she was brought to write to Artaxia that she was content for the public good to be a second wife, and yield the first place to her, nay, to extol him, and even woo Artaxia for him. But Artaxia, mortally hating them both for her brother's sake, was content to hide her hate till she had time to show it, and pretending that all her grudge was against the two paragons of virtue, Musidorus and Pyrocles, even met them half-way in excusing her brother's murder, as not being principal actors, and of the other side, driven to what they did by the ever-pardonable necessity, and so well handled the matter as, though she promised nothing, yet Antiphilus promised himself all that she would have him think. And so a solemn interview was appointed. But, as the poets say, Hymen had not there his saffron-coloured coat, for Artaxia, laying men secretly, and easily they might be secret, since Antiphilus thought she overran him in love, when he came even ready to embrace her, showing rather a countenance of accepting than offering, they came forth, and, having much advantage both in number, valour, and fore preparation, put all his company to the sword but such as could fly away. As for Antiphilus, she caused him and Erona both to be put in irons, hasting back towards her brother's tomb, upon which she meant to sacrifice them, making the love of her brother stand between her and all other motions of grace, from which by nature she was alienated. But great diversity in them two quickly discovered itself for the bearing of that affliction. For Antiphilus, that had no greatness but outward, that taken away, was ready to fall faster than calamity could thrust him, with fruitless begging of life, where reason might well assure him his death was resolved, and weak bemoaning his fortune, to give his enemies a most pleasing music, with many promises and protestations to as little purpose as from a little mind. But Erona, sad indeed, yet like one rather used than new fallen to sadness, as who had the joys of her heart already broken, seemed rather to welcome than to shun that end of misery, speaking little, but what she spake was for Antiphilus, remembering his guiltiness, being at that time prisoner to Tiridates, when the valiant princes slew him, to the disgrace of men, showing that there are women both more wise to judge what is to be expected, and more constant to bear it when it is happened. But her wit, endeared by her youth, her affliction by her birth, and her sadness by her beauty, made this noble Prince Plangus, who, never almost from his cousin Artaxia, was now present at Erona's taking, to perceive the shape of loveliness more perfectly in woe than in joyfulness, as in a picture which receives greater life by the darkness of shadows than by more glittering colours, and seeing to like, and liking to love, and loving straight,
to feel the most instant effects of love, to serve and preserve. So borne by the hasty tide of short leisure, he did hastily deliver together his affection and affectionate care. But she, as if he had spoken of a small matter when he mentioned her life, to which she had not leisure to attend, desired him, if he loved her, to show it in finding some way to save Antiphilus. For her, she found the world but a wearisome stage unto her, where she played a part against her will, and therefore besought him not to cast his love in so unfruitful a place as could not love itself, but, for a testimony of constancy and a suitableness to his word, to do so much comfort to her mind as that for her sake Antiphilus were saved. He told me how much he argued against her tendering him who had so ungratefully betrayed her and foolishly cast away himself, but perceiving she did not only bend her very good wits to speak for him against herself, but, when such a cause could be allied to no reason, yet love would needs make itself a cause, and bar her rather from hearing than yield that she should yield to such arguments, he likewise, in whom the power of love, as they say of spirits, was subject to the love in her, with grief consented, and though backwardly was diligent to labour the help of Antiphilus, a man whom he not only hated as a traitor to Erona, but envied as a possessor of Erona, yet love sware his heart, in spite of his heart, should make him become a servant to his rival. And so did he, seeking all the means of persuading Artaxia, which the authority of so near and so virtuous a kinsman could give unto him. But she, to whom the eloquence of hatred had given revenge the face of delight, rejected all such motions, but the rather more closely imprisoning them in her chief city, where she kept them with intention at the birthday of Tiridates, which was very near, to execute Antiphilus, and, at the day of his death, which was about half a year after, to use the same rigour towards Erona. Plangus, much grieved, because much loving, attempted the humours of the Lydians, to see whether they could come in with forces to succour their princess. But there the next inheritor to the crown, with the true play that is used in the game of kingdoms, had no sooner his mistress in captivity, but he had usurped her place, and making her odious to her people, because of the unfit election she had made, had so left no hope there, but, which is worse, had sent to Artaxia, persuading the justicing her, because that unjustice might give his title the name of justice. Wanting that way, Plangus practised with some dear friends of his to save Antiphilus out of prison, whose day, because it was much nearer than Erona's, and that he well found she had twisted her life upon the same thread with his, he determined first to get him out of prison, and to that end, having prepared all matters as well as in such case he could, where Artaxia had set many of Tiridates' old servants to have well-marking eyes, he conferred with Antiphilus as, by the authority he had, he found means to do, and agreed with him of the time and manner how he should, by the death of some of his jailers, escape. But all being well ordered, and Plangus willingly putting himself into the greatest danger, Antiphilus, who like a bladder swelled ready to break, while it was full of the wind of prosperity, that being out was so abjected as apt to be trod on by everybody, when it came to the point that with some hazard he might be in apparent likelihood to avoid the uttermost harm, his heart fainted, and weak fool, neither hoping nor fearing as he should, gat a conceit that with bewraying this practice he might obtain pardon, and therefore, even a little before Plangus should have come unto him, opened the whole practice to him that had the charge, with unpitied tears idly protesting he had rather die by Artaxia's commandment than against her will to escape, yet begging life upon any the hardest and wretchedest conditions that she should lay upon him. His keeper provided accordingly, so that when Plangus came he was like himself to have been entrapped, but that finding with a lucky insight that it was discovered, he retired, and calling his friends about him, stood upon his guard, as he had good cause. For Artaxia, accounting him most ungrateful, considering that her brother and she had not only preserved him against the malice of his father, but ever used him much liker his birth than his fortune, sent forces to apprehend him. But he among the martial men had gotten so great love, that he could not only keep himself from her malice, but work in their minds the compassion of Erona's adversity. But for the succour of Antiphilus he could get nobody to join with him, the contempt of him having not been able to qualify the hatred, so that Artaxia might easily upon him perform her will, which was, at the humble suit of all the women of that city, to deliver him to their censure, who mortally hated him for having made a law of polygamy, after many tortures, forced him to throw himself from a high pyramis, which was built over Tiridates' tomb, and so to end his false-hearted life, which had planted no strong thought in him, but that he could be unkind. But Plangus, well perceiving that Artaxia stayed only for the appointed day that the fair Erona's body, consumed to ashes, should make a notorious testimony how deeply her brother's death was engraven in her breast, he assembled good numbers of friends whom his virtue, though a stranger, had tied unto him, by force to give her liberty. Contrariwise, Artaxia, to whom anger gave more courage than her sex did fear, used her regal authority the most she could to suppress that sedition and have her will, which, she thought, is the most princely thing that may be. But Plangus, who indeed, as all men witness, is one of the best captains, both for policy and valour, that are trained in the school of Mars, in a conflict overthrew Artaxia's power, though a far greater number, and there took prisoner a base son of her brother's, whom she dearly affected,
and then sent her word that he should run the same race of fortune, whatsoever it was, that Erona did. And happy was that threatening for her, for else Artaxia had hastened the day of her death in respect of those tumults. But now, some principal noblemen of that country interposing themselves, it was agreed that all persons else fully pardoned, and all prisoners except Erona delivered, she should be put into the hands of a principal nobleman, who had a castle of great strength, by oath, if by the day 2 year from Tiridates' death Pyrocles and Musidorus did not in person combat and overcome 2 knights, whom she appointed to maintain her quarrel against Erona, and them of having by treason destroyed her brother, that then Erona should be that same day burnt to ashes. But if they came and had the victory, she should be delivered, but upon no occasion neither freed nor executed till that day. And hereto of both sides all took solemn oath, and so the peace was concluded, they of Plangus' party forcing him to agree, though he himself the sooner condescended, knowing the courtesy of those 2 excellent princes not to refuse so noble a quarrel, and their power such as 2 more like the other 2 were not able to resist. But Artaxia was more, and upon better ground, pleased with this action, for she had even newly received news from Plexirtus that upon the sea he had caused them both to perish, and therefore she held herself sure of the match. But poor Plangus knew not so much, and therefore, seeing his party, as most times it falls out in like case, hungry of any conditions of peace, accepted them, and then obtained leave of the lord that indifferently kept her, to visit Erona, whom he found full of desperate sorrow, suffering neither his unworthiness, nor his wrongs, nor his death, which is the natural conclusion of all worldly acts, either to cover with forgetfulness or diminish with consideration the affection she had borne him, but even glorying in affliction, and shunning all comfort, she seemed to have no delight but in making herself the picture of misery. So that when Plangus came to her, she fell in deadly trances, as if in him she had seen the death of Antiphilus, because he had not succoured him. And yet, her virtue striving, she did at one time acknowledge herself bound, and profess herself injured, instead of allowing the conclusion they had made, or writing to the princes, as he wished her to do, craving nothing but some speedy death to follow her, in spite of just hate, beloved Antiphilus. So that Plangus, having nothing but a ravished kiss from her hand at their parting, went away toward Greece, whitherward he understood the princes were embarked. But by the way it was his fortune to intercept letters written by Artaxia to Plexirtus, wherein she signified her accepting him to her husband, whom she had ever favoured, so much the rather as he had performed the conditions of her marriage in bringing to their deserved end her greatest enemies. Withal thanking the sea, in such terms as he might well perceive it was by some treason wrought in Plexirtus' ship. Whereupon, to make more diligent search, he took ship himself, and came into Laconia, inquiring, and by his inquiry finding, that such a ship was indeed with fight and fire perished, none almost escaping. But for Pyrocles and Musidorus it was assuredly determined that they were cast away, for the name of such princes, especially in Greece, would quickly else have been a large witness to the contrary. Full of grief with that, for the loss of such who left the world poor of perfection, but more sorry for Erona's sake, who now by them could not be relieved, a new advertisement from Armenia overtook him, which multiplied the force of his anguish. It was a message from the nobleman who had Erona in ward, giving him to understand that since his departure, Artaxia, using the benefit of time, had besieged him in his castle, demanding present delivery of her, whom yet for his faith given he would not before the day appointed, if possibly he could resist, which he foresaw long he should not do for want of victual, which he had not so wisely provided, because he trusted upon the general oath taken for 2 years' space, and therefore willed him to make haste to his succour, and come with no small forces. For all they that were of his side in Armenia were consumed, and Artaxia had increased her might by marriage of Plexirtus, who, now crowned king there, sticked not to glory in the murder of Pyrocles and Musidorus, as having just cause thereto, in respect of the deaths of his sister Andromana, her son, his nephew, and his own daughter Zelmane, all whose loss he unjustly charged them withal, and now openly sticked not to confess what a revenge his wit had brought forth. Plangus, much astonished herewith, bethought himself what to do, for to return to Armenia was vain, since his friends there were utterly overthrown. Then thought he of going to his father, but he had already, even since the death of his stepmother and brother, attempted the recovering of his favour, and all in vain. For they that had before joined with Andromana to do him the wrong thought now no life for them if he returned, and therefore kept him still with new forged suspicions odious to his father. So that Plangus, reserving that for a work of longer time than the saving of Erona could bear, determined to go to the mighty and good king Euarchus, who lately having, to his eternal fame, fully not only conquered his enemies, but established good government in their countries, he hoped he might have present succour of him, both for the justness of the cause and revenge of his children's death, by so heinous a treason murdered. Therefore with diligence he went to him, and by the way, passing through my country, it was my hap to find him, the most overthrown man with grief that ever I hope to see again. And thus, excellent lady, I have obeyed you in this story, wherein if it well please you to consider what is the strange power of love, and what is due to his authority, you shall exercise therein the true nobleness of your judgment, and do the more right to the unfortunate historian. Zelmane, sighing for Erona's sake,
yet inwardly comforted, in that she assured herself Euarchus would not spare to take in hand the just delivering of her, joined with the just revenge of his children's loss, having now what she desired of Basilius, to avoid his further discourses of affection, encouraged the shepherds to begin, whom she saw already ready for them. The end of the second book. Book 3, Part 1 of the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole Lee. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia by Philip Sidney. Book 3, Part 1. The third book. This last day's danger, having made Pamela's love discern what a loss it should have suffered, if Doris had been destroyed, bred such tenderness of kindness in her toward him, that she could no longer keep love from looking out through her eyes, and going forth in her words, whom before, as a close prisoner, she had to her heart only committed. So as finding not only by his speeches and letters, but by the pitiful oration of languishing behaviour, and the easily deciphered character of a sorrowful face, that despair began now to threaten him destruction, she grew content both to pity him and let him see she pitied him, as well by making her own beautiful beams to thaw away the former iciness of her behaviour, as by entertaining his discourses, whensoever he did use them, in the third person of Musidorus, to so far a degree that in the end she said that, if she had been the princess whom that disguised prince had virtuously loved, she would have requited his faith with faithful affection, finding in her heart that nothing could so heartily love as virtue, with many more words to the same sense of noble favour and chaste plainness. Which when at the first it made that unexpected bliss shine upon Doris, he was like one frozen with extremity of cold, over hastily brought to a great fire, rather oppressed than relieved with such a lightening of felicity. But after the strength of nature had made him able to feel the sweetness of joyfulness, that again being a child of passion, and never acquainted with mediocrity, could not set bounds upon his happiness, nor be content to give desire a kingdom, but that it must be an unlimited monarchy, so that the ground he stood upon being over high in happiness and slippery through affection, he could not hold himself from falling into such an error, which with sighs blew all comfort out of his breast, and washed away all cheerfulness of his desire. And desire considering nothing but opportunity, one time, Mopsa being called away by her mother, and he left alone with Pamela, the sudden occasion called love, and that never stayed to ask reason's leave, but made the too much loving Doris take her in his arms, offering to kiss her, and as it were to establish a trophy of his victory. But she, as if she had been ready to drink a wine of excellent taste and colour, which suddenly she perceived had poison in it, so did she put him away from her, looking first up to heaven, as amazed to find herself so beguiled in him, then laying cruel punishment upon him of angry love, and lowering beauty, showing disdain, and a despising disdain. Away, said she, unworthy man, to love or to be loved. Assure thyself I hate myself for being so deceived. Judge then what I do thee for deceiving me. Let me see thee no more, the only fault of my judgment and stain of my conscience. With that she called Mopsa, and, not staying for any answer, which was no other but a flood of tears, which she seemed not to mark, much less to pity, and chid her for having so left her alone. It was not a sorrow, but it was even a death, which then laid hold of Doris, which certainly at that instant would have killed him, but that the fear to tarry longer in her presence, contrary to her commandment, gave him life to carry himself away from her sight, and to run into the woods, where throwing himself down at the foot of a tree, he did not fall into lamentation, for that proceeded of pitying or grieving for himself, which he did no way, but to curses of his life, as one that detested himself, for finding himself not only unhappy, but unhappy after being fallen from all happiness, and to be fallen from all happiness not by any misconceiving, but by his own fault, and his fault to be done to no other but to Pamela, he did not tender his own estate, but despised it, greedily drawing into his mind all conceits which might more and more torment him. And so remained he 2 days in the woods, disdaining to give his body food or his mind comfort, loving in himself nothing but the love of her. And indeed that love only strave with the fury of his anguish, telling it that if it destroyed Doris, it should also destroy the image of her that lived in Doris. And when the thought of that was crept in unto him, it began to win of him some compassion to the shrine of that image, and to bewail not for himself whom he hated, but that so notable a love should perish. Then began he only so far to wish his own good, as that Pamela might pardon him the fault, though not the punishment. And the uttermost height he aspired unto was, that after his death she might yet pity his error, and know that it proceeded of love and not of boldness. That conceit found such friendship in his thoughts that at last he yielded, since he was banished her presence, to seek some means by writing to show his sorrow and testify his repentance. Therefore, getting him his pen, he thought fit to counterfeit his hand, lest she should cast his letter away as soon as she saw it, and writing an elegiac, marring much with mending, he made an end of it, And one day, when all were gone to dinner, he stole up into Pamela's chamber, and placed the letter in her standish, which he first kissed, and craved of it a friendly keeping. Which letter when Pamela found, what it would have wrought in her she herself could not tell. For before her reason could moderate the disputation between favour and faultiness, her sister Miso called her down to entertain Zelmane, who was come to visit the two sisters, about whom, as about two poles, the sky of beauty was turned, while Gynecia wearied her bed with her melancholy sickness, and made Miso shrewdness, who like a spirit set to keep a treasure, barred Zelmane from any further conference, to be the lieutenant of her jealousy, both she and her husband driving Zelmane to such a strait of resolution, either of impossible granting or dangerous refusing, as the best escape she had was, as much as she could, to avoid their company. So as, this day being the 4th day after the uproar, Basilius being with his sick wife, conferring upon such examinations as Philanax and other of his noblemen had made of this late sedition, all touching Cecropia with vehement suspicion of giving either flame or fuel unto it, Zelmane came with her body to find her mind, which was gone long before her and had gotten his seat in Philoclea, who now with a bashful cheerfulness, as though she were ashamed that she could not choose but be glad, joined with her sister in making much of Zelmane. And so, as they sate devising how to give more feathers to the wings of time, there came to the lodge door 6 maids, all in one livery of scarlet petticoats, which were tucked up almost to their knees, the petticoats themselves being in many places garnished with leaves, their legs naked, saving that above the ankles they had little black silk laces, upon which did hang a few silver bells, like which they had a little above their elbows upon their bare arms. Upon their hair they wear garlands of roses and gilliflowers, and the hair was so dressed as that came again above the garlands, interchanging a mutual covering, so as it was doubtful whether the hair dressed the garlands or the garlands dressed the hair. Their breasts liberal to the eye, the face of the foremost of them in excellency fair, and of the rest lovely, if not beautiful, and beautiful might have been, if they had not suffered greedy Phoebus over often and hard to kiss them. Their countenances full of a graceful gravity, so as, the gesture matched with the apparel, it might seem a wanton modesty, an enticing soberness. Each of them had an instrument of music in their hands, which, consorting their well-pleasing tunes, did charge each ear with unsensibleness that did not lend itself unto them. The music entering alone into the lodge, the ladies were all desirous to see from whence so pleasant a guest was come, and therefore went out together, where, before they could take the pains to doubt, much less to ask the question of their quality, the fairest of them, with a gay but yet discreet demeanour, in this sort spake to them: "Most excellent ladies, whose excellencies have power to make cities envy these woods, and solitariness to be accounted the sweetest company, vouchsafe our message your gracious hearing, which as it comes from love, so comes it from lovely persons. The maids of all this coast of Arcadia, understanding the often access that certain shepherds of these quarters are allowed to have in this forbidden place, and that their rural sports are not disdained of you, have been stirred up with emulation to them and affection to you, to bring forth something which might as well breed your contentment. Therefore, hoping that the goodness of their intention and the hurtlessness of their sex shall excuse the breach of the commandment in coming to this place unsent for, they chose out us to invite both your princely parents and yourselves to a place in the woods about 1/2 mile hence, where they have provided some such sports as they trust your gracious acceptations will interpret to be delightful. We have been at the other lodge, but finding them there busied in weightier affairs, our trust is that you will not deny the shining of your eyes upon us." The ladies stood in some doubt whether they should go or not, lest Basilius might be angry withal. But Miso, that had been at none of the pastorals, and had a great desire to lead her old senses abroad to some pleasure, told them plainly they should nor will nor choose, but go thither and make the honest country people know that they were not so squeamish as folks thought of them. The ladies, glad to be warranted by her authority, with a smiling humbleness obeyed her, Pamela only casting a seeking look, whether she could see Dorus, who, poor wretch, wandered half mad for sorrow in the woods, crying for pardon of her who could not hear him, but indeed was grieved for his absence, having given the wound to him through her own heart. But so the 3 ladies and Miso went with those 6 nymphs, conquering the length of the way with the force of music, leaving only Mopsa behind, who disgraced weeping with her countenance, because her mother would not suffer her to show her new scoured face among them. But the place appointed, as they thought, met them half in their way, so well were they pleased with the sweet tunes and pretty conversation of their inviters. There found they, in the midst of the thickest part of the wood, a little square place, not burthened with trees, but with a board covered and beautified with the pleasantest fruits that sunburned autumn could deliver to them. The maids besought the ladies to sit down, and taste of the swelling grapes, which seemed great with child with Bacchus, and of the divers coloured plums, which gave the eye a pleasant taste, before they came to the mouth. The ladies would not show to scorn their provision, but ate and drank a little of their cool wine, which seemed to laugh for joy to come to such lips. But after the collation was ended, and that they looked for the coming forth of such devices as were prepared for them, there rushed out of the woods 20 armed men, who round about environed them, and laying hold on Zelmane before she could draw her sword, and taking it from her, put hoods over the heads of all 4, and so muffled, by force set them on horseback and carried them away, the sisters in vain crying for succour, while Zelmane's heart was rent in pieces with rage of the injury and disdain of her fortune. But when they had carried them 4 or 5 mile further, they left me so with a gag in her mouth, and bound hand and foot, so to take her fortune, and brought the 3 ladies, by that time the knight seemed with her silence to conspire to their treason, to a castle about 10 mile from the lodges, where they were fain to take a boat which waited for them, for the castle stood in the midst of a great lake upon a high rock, where partly by art, but principally by nature, it was by all men esteemed impregnable. But at the castle gate their faces were discovered, and there were met with a great number of torches, after whom the sisters knew their aunt-in-law Cecropia. But that sight increased the deadly terror of the princesses, looking for nothing but death, since they were in the power of the wicked Cecropia, who yet came unto them, making courtesy the outside of mischief, and desiring them not to be discomforted, for they were in a place dedicated to their service. Philoclea, with a look where love shined through the mist of fear, besought her to be good unto them, having never deserved evil of her. But Pamela's high heart, disdaining humbleness to injury, "Aunt," said she, "what you have determined of us, I pray you do it speedily. For my part, I look for no service where I find violence." But Cecropia, using no more words with them, conveyed them all 3 to several lodgings, Zelmane's heart so swelling with spite that she could not bring forth a word, and so left them, first taking from them their knives, determined of them, and then, giving such order that they wanted nothing but liberty and comfort, she went to her son, who yet kept his bed because of his wound he had received of Zelmane, and told him whom now he had in his power. Amphialus was but even then returned from far countries, where he had won immortal fame both of courage and courtesy, when he met with the princesses and was hurt by Zelmane, so as he was utterly ignorant of all his mother's wicked devices, to which he would never have consented, being, like a rose out of a briar, an excellent son of an evil mother. And now, when he heard of this, was as much amazed as if he had seen the sun fall to the earth, and therefore desired his mother that she would tell him how all these matters had happened. "Son," said she, "I will do it willingly, and, since all is done for you, I will hide nothing from you. And howsoever I might be ashamed to tell it strangers, who would think it wickedness, yet what is done for your sake, how evil soever to others, to you is virtue. To begin then, even with the beginning. This doting fool Basilius that now reigns, having lived unmarried till he was nigh 60 years old, and in all his speeches affirming, and in all his doings assuring, that he never would marry, made all the eyes of his country to be bent upon your father, his only brother, but younger by 30 years, as upon the undoubted successor, being indeed a man worthy to reign, thinking nothing enough for himself, where this goose, you see, puts down his head before there be anything near to touch him. So that he holding place in estimation as heir of Arcadia, obtaining me of my father the king of Argos, his brother helping to the conclusion with protesting his bachelry intention, for else you may be sure the king of Argos nor his daughter would have suffered their royal blood to be stained with the base name of a subjection. So that I came into this country as apparent princess thereof, and accordingly was courted and followed of the ladies of this country. My port and pomp did well become a king of Argos' daughter. In my presence their tongues were turned into ears, and their ears were captives unto my tongue. Their eyes admired my majesty, and happy was he or she on whom I would suffer the beams thereof to fall. Did I go to church, it seemed the very gods waited for me, their devotions not being solemnized till I was ready. Did I walk abroad to see my delight? Nay, my walking was the delight itself, for to it was the concourse, one thrusting upon another who might show himself most diligent and serviceable towards me. My sleeps were inquired after, and my wakings never unsaluted. The very gate of my house, full of principal persons, who were glad if their presence had received a grateful acceptation. And in this felicity wert thou born, the very earth submitting itself unto thee to be trodden as by his prince, and to that pass had my husband's virtue, by my good help, within short time brought it. With a plot we laid, as we should not have needed to have waited the tedious work of a natural end of Basilius, when the heavens, I think envying my great felicity, then stopped thy father's breath, when he breathed nothing but power and sovereignty. Yet did not thy orphancy or my widowhood deprive us of the delightful prospect which the hill of honour doth yield, while expectation of thy succession did bind dependencies unto us. But before, my son, thou wert come to the age to feel the sweetness of authority, this beast, whom I can never name with patience, falsely and foolishly married this Gynecia, then a young girl, and brought her to sit above me in all feasts, to turn her shoulder to meward in all our solemnities. It is certain it is not so great a spite to be surmounted by strangers as by one's own allies. Think then what my mind was, since withal there is no question the fall is greater from the first to the second than from the second to the undermost. The rage did swell in my heart, so much the more as it was fain to be suppressed in silence and disguised with humbleness. But above all the rest, the grief of griefs was, when with these 2 daughters, now thy prisoners, she cut off all hope of thy succession. It was a tedious thing to me that my eyes should look lower than anybody's, that, myself being by, another's voice than mine should be more respected. But it was insupportable unto me to think that not only I, but thou, should spend all thy time in such misery, and that the son should see my eldest son less than a prince. And though I had been a saint, I could not choose, finding the change this change of fortune bred unto me. For now from the multitude of followers silence grew to be at my gate, and absence in my presence. the guess of my mind could prevail more before than now many of my earnest requests. And thou, my dear son, by the fickle multitude no more than an ordinary person, born of the mud of the people, regarded. But I, remembering that in all miseries weeping becomes fools, and practice wise folks, have tried divers means to pull us out of the mire of subjection. And though many times fortune failed me, yet did I never fail myself. Wild beasts I kept in a cave hard by the lodges, which I caused by night to be fed in the place of their pastorals, I as then living in my house hard by the place. And against the hour they were to meet, having kept the beasts without meat, then let them loose, knowing that they would seek their food there, and devour what they found. But blind fortune, hating sharp-sighted inventions, made them unluckily to be killed. After I used my servant Clinias to stir a notable tumult of country people, but those louts were too gross instruments for delicate conceits. Now, lastly, finding Philanax his examinations grow dangerous, I thought to play double or quit, and with the sleight I used of my fine-witted wench Artesia, with other maids of mine, would have sent these goodly inheritrixes of Arcadia to have pleaded their cause before Pluto, but that over-fortunately for them you made me know the last day how vehemently this childish passion of love doth torment you. Therefore I have brought them unto you, yet wishing rather hate than love in you. For hate often begetteth victory, love commonly is the instrument of subjection. It is true that I would also by the same practice have entrapped the parents, but my maids failed of it, not daring to tarry long about it. But this sufficeth, since, these being taken away, you are the undoubted inheritor, and Basilius will not long overlive this loss. O mother, said Amphialus, speak not of doing them hurt, no more than to mine eyes or my heart, or if I have anything more dear than eyes or heart unto me. Let others find what sweetness they will in ever fearing, because they ever are feared. For my part, I will think myself highly entitled, if I may be once by Philoclea accepted for a servant. Well, said Cecropia, I would I had borne you of my mind, as well as of my body, then should you not have sunk under these base weaknesses. But since you have tied your thoughts in so wilful a knot, it is happy my policy hath brought matters to such a pass, as you may both enjoy affection, and upon that build your sovereignty. Alas, said Amphialus, my heart would fain yield you thanks for setting me in the way of felicity, but that fear kills them in me before they are fully born. For if Philoclea be displeased, how can I be pleased? If she count it unkindness, shall I give tokens of kindness? Perchance she condemns me of this action, and shall I triumph? Perchance she drowns now the beauties I love with sorrowful tears, and where is then my rejoicing? You have reason, said Cecropia with a feigned gravity. I will therefore send her away presently, that her contentment may be recovered. No, good mother, said Amphialus. Since she is here, I would not for my life constrain presence, but rather would I die than consent to absence. Pretty intricate follies, said Cecropia, but get you up, and see how you can prevail with her, while I go to the other sister. For after we shall have our hands full to defend ourselves, if Basilius hap to besiege us. But remembering herself, she turned back, and asked him what he would have done with Zelmane, since now he might be revenged of his hurt. Nothing but honourably, answered Amphialus, having deserved no other of me, especially being, as I hear, greatly cherished of Philoclea, and therefore I could wish they were lodged together. Oh no, said Cecropia, company confirms resolutions, and lowliness breeds a weariness of one's thoughts, and so a sooner consenting to reasonable proffers. But Amphialus, taking of his mother Philoclea's knives, which he kept as a relic, since she had worn them, gat up, and calling for his richest apparel, nothing seemed sumptuous enough for his mistress's eyes, and that which was costly he feared was not dainty, and though the invention were delicate, he misdoubted the making. And in that sort he went to Philoclea's chamber, whom he found, because her chamber was over lightsome, sitting off that side of her bed which was from the window, which did cast such a shadow upon her as a good painter would bestow upon Venus, when under the trees she bewailed the murder of Adonis, her hands and fingers, as it were, indented one within the other, her shoulder leaning to her bed's head, and over her head a scarf, which did eclipse almost half her eyes, which under it fixed their beams upon the wall by with so steady a manner, as if in that place they might well change, but not mend their object. And so remained they a good while after his coming in, he not daring to trouble her, nor she perceiving him, till that, a little varying her thoughts, something quickening her senses, she heard him as he happened to stir his upper garment, and perceiving him, rose up, with a demeanour where in the book of beauty there was nothing to be read but sorrow, for kindness was blotted out, and anger was never there. But Amphialus, that had entrusted his memory with long and forcible speeches, found it so locked up in amazement that he could pick nothing out of it, but the beseeching her to take what was done in good part, and to assure herself there was nothing but honour meant unto her person. But she, making no other answer, but letting her hands fall one from the other, which before were joined, with eyes something cast aside, and a silent sigh, gave him to understand that, considering his doings, she thought his speech as full of incongruity as her answer would be void of purpose. Whereupon, he kneeling down and kissing her hand, which she suffered with a countenance witnessing captivity, but not kindness, he besought her to have pity of him, whose love went beyond the bounds of conceit, much more of uttering, that in her hands the balance of his life or death did stand, whereto the least motion of hers would serve to determine, she being indeed the mistress of his life, and he her eternal slave, and with true vehemency besought her that he might hear her speak, whereupon she suffered her sweet breath to turn itself into these kind of words. Alas, cousin, said she, what shall my tongue be able to do, which is informed by the ears one way, and by the eyes another? You call for pity, and use cruelty. You say you love me, and yet do the effects of enmity. You affirm your death is in my hands, but you have brought me to so near a degree of death as, when you will, you may lay death upon me, so that while you say I am mistress of your life, I am not mistress of mine own. You entitle yourself my slave, but I am sure I am yours. If then violence, injury, terror, and depriving of that which is more dear than life itself, liberty, be fit orators for affection, you may expect that I will be easily persuaded. But if the nearness of our kindred breed any remorse in you, or there be any such thing in you which you call love toward me, then let not my fortune be disgraced with the name of imprisonment. Let not my heart waste itself by being vexed with feeling evil and fearing worse. Let not me be a cause of my parents' woeful destruction, but restore me to myself, and so doing, I shall account I have received myself of you. And what I say for myself, I say for my dear sister and my friend Zelmane, for I desire no well-being without they may be partakers. With that her tears rained down from her heavenly eyes, and seemed to water the sweet and beautiful flowers of her face. But Amphialus was like the poor woman who, loving a tame doe she had above all earthly things, having long played withal, and made it feed at her hand and lap, is constrained at length by famine, all her flock being spent, and she fallen into extreme poverty, to kill the deer to sustain her life. Many a pitiful look doth she cast upon it, and many a time doth she draw back her hand before she can give the stroke. For even so Amphialus, by a hunger-starved affection, was compelled to offer this injury, and yet the same affection made him, with a tormenting grief, think unkindness in himself, that he could find in his heart any way to restrain her freedom. But at length, neither able to grant nor deny, he thus answered her. Dear lady, said he, I will not say unto you, how justly soever I may do it, that I am neither author nor accessory unto this your withholding, for since I do not redress it, I am as faulty as if I had begun it. But this I protest unto you, and this protestation of mine let the heavens hear, and if I lie, let them answer me with a deadly thunderbolt, that in my soul I wish I had never seen the light, or rather that I had never had a father to beget such a child, than that by my means those eyes should overflow their own beauties, then by my means the sky of your virtue should be overclouded with sorrow. But woe is me, most excellent lady, I find myself most willing to obey you, neither truly do mine ears receive the least word you speak with any less reverence than as absolute and unresistible commandments. But alas, that tyrant love, which now possesseth the hold of all my life and reason, will no way suffer it. It is love, not I, which disobey you. What then shall I say, but that I, who am ready to lie under your feet, to venture, nay, to lose my life at your least commandment, I am not the stay of your freedom, but love, love which ties you in your own knots. It is you yourself that imprison yourself. It is your beauty which makes these castle walls embrace you. It is your own eyes which reflect upon themselves this injury. Then is there no other remedy, but that you some way vouchsafe to satisfy this love's vehemency, which since it grew in yourself, without question you shall find it, far more than I, tractable. But with these words Philoclea fell to so extreme a quaking, and her lively whiteness did degenerate to such a deadly paleness, that Amphialus feared some dangerous trance, so that taking her hand and feeling that it, which was wont to be one of the chief firebrands of Cupid, had all the sense of it wrapped up in coldness, he began humbly to beseech her to put away all fear, and to assure herself upon the vow he made thereof unto God and herself, that the uttermost forces he would ever employ to conquer her affection should be desire and desert. That promise brought Philoclea again to herself, so that, slowly lifting up her eyes upon him, with a countenance over courteous, but then languishing, she told him that he should do well to do so, if indeed he had ever tasted what true love was, for that where now she did bear him good will, she should, if he took any other way, hate and abhor the very thought of him, assuring him withal that though his mother had taken away her knives, yet the house of death had so many doors as she would easily fly into it, if ever she found her honour endangered. Amphialus, having the cold ashes of care cast upon the coals of desire, leaving some of his mother's gentlewomen to wait upon Philoclea, himself indeed a prisoner to his prisoner, and making all his authority to be but a footstool to humbleness, went from her to his mother, to whom, with words which affection indited, but amazement uttered, he delivered what had passed between him and Philoclea, beseeching her to try what her persuasions could do with her, while he gave order for all such things as were necessary against such forces as he looked daily Basilius would bring before his castle. His mother bade him quiet himself, for she doubted not to take fit times, but that the best way was first to let her own passion a little tire itself. So they, calling Clinias and some other of their council, advised upon their present affairs. First he dispatched private letters to all those principal lords and gentlemen of the country, whom he thought either alliance or friendship to himself might draw, with special motions from the general consideration of duty, not omitting all such whom either youthful age or youth-like minds did fill with unlimited desires, besides such whom any discontentment made hungry of change, or an overspended want made want a civil war. To each, according to the counsel of his mother, conforming himself after their humours. To his friends friendliness, to the ambitious great expectations, to the displeased revenge, to the greedy spoil, wrapping their hopes with such cunning as they rather seemed given over unto them as partakers than promises sprung of necessity. Then sent he to his mother's brother, the king of Argos, but he was then so overlaid with war himself, as from thence he could attend small succour. But because he knew how violently rumours do blow the sails of popular judgments, and how few there be that can discern between truth and truth-likeness, between shows and substance, he caused a justification of this his action to be written, whereof were sowed abroad many copies, which, with some glosses of probability, might indeed hide the foulness of his treason, and from true commonplaces fetch down most false applications. For beginning how much the duty which is owed to the country goes beyond all other duties, since in itself it contains them all, and that for the respect thereof not only all tender respects of kindred, or whatsoever other friendships are to be laid aside, but that even long-held opinions, rather builded upon a secret of government than any ground of truth, are to be forsaken, he fell by degrees to show that since the end whereto anything is directed is ever to be of more noble reckoning than the thing thereto directed, that therefore the real public was more to be regarded than any person or magistrate that thereunto was ordained. The feeling consideration whereof had moved him, though as near of kin to Basilius as could be, yet to set principally before his eyes the good estate of so many thousands, over whom Basilius reigned, rather than so to hoodwink himself with affection as to suffer the realm to run to manifest ruin. The care whereof did kindly appertain to those who, being subaltern magistrates and officers of the crown, were to be employed as from the prince so for the people, and of all other, especially himself, who being descended of the royal race and next heir male, nature had no sooner opened his eyes, but that the soil whereupon they did look was to look for at his hands a continual carefulness, which as from his childhood he had ever carried, so now finding that his uncle had not only given over all care of government, but had put it into the hands of Philanax, a man neither in birth comparable to many, nor for his corrupt, proud, and partial dealing liked of any, but beside had set his daughters, in whom the whole estate, as next heirs thereunto, had no less interest than himself, in so unfit and ill-guarded a place as it were not only dangerous for their persons, but if they should be conveyed to any foreign country, to the whole commonwealth pernicious, that therefore he had brought them into this strong castle of his, which way if it might seem strange, they were to consider that new necessities require new remedies. But there they should be served and honoured as belonged to their greatness, until by the general assembly of the estates it should be determined how they should to their best both private and public advantage be matched, vowing all faith and duty both to the father and children never by him to be violated. But if in the meantime, before the estates could be assembled, he should be assailed, he would then for his own defence take arms, desiring all that either tendered the dangerous case of their country, or in their hearts loved justice, to defend him in this just action. And if the prince should command them otherwise, yet to know that therein he was no more to be obeyed than if he should call for poison to hurt himself withal, since all that was done for his service, howsoever he might, seduced by Philanax, interpret of it, he protesting that whatsoever he should do for his own defence should be against Philanax, and no way against Basilius. To this effect, amplified with arguments and examples, and painted with rhetorical colours, did he sow abroad many discourses, which as they prevailed, with some of more quick than sound conceit, to run his fortune with him, so in many did it breed a coolness to deal violently against him, and a false-minded neutrality to expect the issue. But, besides the ways he used to weaken the adverse party, he omitted nothing for the strengthening of his own, the chief trust whereof, because he wanted men to keep the field, he reposed in the surety of his castle, which at least would win him much time, the mother of many mutations. To that, therefore, he bent both his outward and inward eyes, striving to make art strive with nature, to whether of them two that fortification should be most beholding. The seat nature bestowed, but art gave the building, which as his rocky hardness would not yield to undermining force, so to open assaults he took counsel of skill how to make all approaches, if not impossible, yet difficult, as well at the foot of the castle as round about the lake, to give unquiet lodgings to them whom only enmity would make neighbours. Then omitted he nothing of defence, as well simple defence as that which did defend by offending, fitting instruments of mischief to places whence the mischief might be most liberally bestowed. Neither was his smallest care for victuals, as well for the providing that which should suffice both in store and goodness, as in well preserving it, and wary distributing it, both in quantity and quality, spending that first which would keep least. Even of vices he made his profit, making the cowardly Clinias to have care of the watch, which he knew his own fear would make him very wakefully perform. In the midst of danger he did exercise his men daily in all their charges, his hand and body disdaining no base matters, nor shrinking from the heavy. The only odds was that, when others took breath, he sighed, and, when others rested, he crossed his arms, For love, passing through the pikes of danger, and tumbling itself in the dust of labour, yet made him still remember his sweet desire and beautiful image. End of Book 3, Part 1.